AI is not here to hurt us. It's here to help us. And if we can utilize this technology, especially us in the church, we can make more impact. We can get more done with less effort, and we can save time to do the more important things. AI saves us time on the minutia. It saves us time on the busy work so that we can spend time in the real engaging work of ministry.
Welcome to the Post-Christian Podcast, where we help you make disciples in our increasingly post-Christian world. My name is Bryant. I'm the campus pastor at Gateway in South Austin and Gateway Austin Online. I'm also the founder of Catalyzing Community. Sign up for our email newsletter at ericbryant.org and we'll send you free resources. On today's episode of the Post-Christian Podcast, I'm here with Dustin Stout. How you doing, Dustin?
Doing great. It's a beautiful rainy day here in Bakersfield, California, and I'm enjoying every moment of it.
Well, I'm so glad. It's great to have you on. I know it doesn't rain there much, but I want to hear a little bit more about your story of how you grew from where you were in ministry to now owning an AI website called Magai. And I'm really curious to learn more about it as well. But maybe talk about your journey towards what you're doing now with how it all started.
Well, I mean, I don't want to keep you all day, but I grew up in small town Pennsylvania. All my life wanted to be an actor. Decided to move to LA as soon as I graduated high school. Found out real quickly that in Hollywood, celebrities get to act and actors get to wait tables. And I didn't really like waiting tables, but I loved Jesus. And long story short, found myself as the youth director for a local church. And a hobby of graphic design. I kind of picked it up at the end of high school when my art teacher let me fiddle around on his computer that happened to have Photoshop on it. So as a youth director working at a small satellite campus of a very large church, you wear a lot of hats. And so I was not only the youth director, high school and junior high, I was also doing all the graphics for the church. I was also updating the website for the church. I've always had a knack for technology. I think I got it from my grandpa, who his entire basement was just walls filled with different gadgets and electronics. And so I've always had this love of technology, took to it really quickly. So I found myself, wearing those hats, taught myself how to build websites and started a blog. And as I started blogging about what I was teaching the kids, but also I was learning to use social media. This was like peak Facebook, 2008, when kids still thought Facebook was cool. Twitter was just really emerging, and blogging was really kind of blowing up. And so I started a blog and I started writing about social media and how I was using it to reach my target audience. And before long, people started contacting me saying, "Hey, you seem to know a lot about this social media thing. Could you come help our business with it?" And long story short, I lost my salary at the church. We had budget cuts. They wanted me to keep working, but couldn't afford to pay me. And I had a brand new family at the time, so I had to say no to that. So I ended up leaving the ministry to start my own marketing agency, where we did web design, search engine optimization, social media strategy, and content marketing. As I was doing that, I really realized that God gave me some gifts, and a layer of that gifting was perfectionism. Now, that can be both a gift and a curse. It's a gift in that, I really care about the details. And it's a curse in that when you're doing service-based work, consulting work, you take a lot longer. And oftentimes that doesn't scale very well. So I had a hard time scaling the agency past myself because I was a bit of a roadblock. But I realized that if I created digital products, if I created things that thousands and millions of people can use, and I use my perfectionism on those products, it's a much better fit for my gifting. And so I started creating software. My first product was a WordPress plugin. It did very well. I partnered with a couple of friends who were developers, and it was very successful. I left that company in 2020 to start a couple other software startups, and they failed miserably. And for 2 years, I tried getting them off the ground. They just weren't finding product market fit. Ended up losing well over $65,000. I was broke, and I was broken emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Felt like God had just given up on me, and nothing I was doing was prospering. And so I really had to be in this place where I needed something to work. I started applying for jobs for the first time in over 10 years. And then ChatGPT hit the scene. ChatGPT was an AI tool that I had used AI tools before, but this was game changing. I used it, and within the first 10 minutes, I said, this is going to change the world. But the perfectionist in me also went, well, why doesn't it do this? And why doesn't it do this? And why does it make this hard? And I wish I could do this. So the perfectionist and the entrepreneur in me went, I wonder if I can make this better. And long story short, I don't know how, but God gave me the ability to learn quickly on how to build an app that I ultimately wanted for myself selfishly, and figured a lot of other people could help as well, and solve a lot of the problems that I saw that were going to be coming up. As there were multiple AI models fighting for people's subscription dollars, and multiple AI tools that were all these different subscriptions. And if I could bring them into one place and one beautiful interface to allow people to get work done, especially the non-technical people among us, then I think I can make a big impact. And that's where we're at today.
Well, I want to hear more about Magi, but if we could just back up for a little bit. You started playing around with Chat GPT, and you're in that world. You know technology. Many of us do not. You say it's a game changer, and of course, sometimes we see on the news it could be a world ender, when it comes to AI. And there's some real valid concerns about people losing jobs, all the way to the Terminator kind of idea. How would you describe AI's capabilities, your concerns about the future, versus maybe giving us non-technical folks a sense of peace or right-sizing our way of thinking about AI?
Yeah, so I actually did a talk about this at a couple different conferences, a couple different church conferences. I just spoke in Dallas last month at the Modern Church Leader Conference, and talked about this very subject, how Hollywood has really shaped the way that we think of AI. And you go through all the movies, the Terminators, the Matrix, there are literally dozens of movies that I walked through and talked about how Hollywood has painted this picture of AI is here to kill us. But the truth is, if you go back through all those movies, you find out in many of them, AI was the one who actually helped us win the day. And, you think about Terminator 2, who was the good guy? Arnold. What was Arnold? He was an AI. You look at the Matrix, and one of my favorite ones. The Matrix is this complete reality bending thing where AI has us entrapped and has pretty much won the war. But who helps Neo figure out who he is? The Oracle. Who's the Oracle? The Oracle is AI. So AI actually is the hero in much of the story. And that's sort of the theme of what I was teaching is AI is not here to hurt us. It's here to help us. And if we can utilize this technology, especially us in the church, we can make more impact. We can get more done with less effort, and we can save time to do the more important things. And so one of the things that AI is really good at is taking lots of data, summarizing it, and turning it into other things. Now think about what a lot of church admins spend a lot of their time doing, and even church pastors spend a lot of their time doing. They write a sermon, and then they have to turn that sermon into other pieces of content, like study guides. They have to turn it into small group questions. They have to turn it into social media content. They have to turn it into a blog post, and they have to repurpose this content. So AI can take all of that work and trim it down from, maybe 5, 6, 7 hours of work to several minutes. And imagine what the impact is if you now have 5 more hours that you can spend ministering to people one-on-one. That to me is far more impactful than, anything else. To me, it's AI saves us time on the minutia. It saves us time on the busy work so that we can spend time in the real engaging work of ministry. And that's just one of the unlocks. I mean, the potential for AI to unlock all sorts of different upgrades. I see it as a supplement to our own skills rather than a replacement. So the adage that you start to hear a lot of in the world of AI is that AI is not here to replace you, but somebody using AI will. So if you don't jump in, and I like to rephrase it and say, if AI is not here to replace you, but somebody using Magi will. So the idea is that it's here to augment our skills. Like if you are good at writing and you ask AI to write something for you, you'll find out very good. It's not nearly as good as you are. As good as these models are, humans are still much better when it comes to creative type of ideas, things that require experience, things that require nuance, things that require, high degrees of understanding and reasoning. And in that, that's where our strength will always be. AI will never have our strengths. It will never have our unique combination of experiences. And so by using AI to do the writing, to do the summarization, to do the repurposing faster and more effectively, that's really what I see the future of AI and human work together.
Well, and talk about Magi for a little bit, because it is unique. I was kind of exploring different AI models, trying to figure out which one is best for helping me, whether it's, coming up with analogies or editing.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a dissertation I'm trying to turn into a book. I was looking at what's the best at visuals, and all of a sudden I found Magi, which in many ways you have kind of all of the above. And I didn't have to necessarily
Yeah.
subscribe to lots of different AI models. How did you come about with this idea, and how are they letting you do this?
Well, so that's one of the problems that I saw immediately. The AI arms race had begun very quickly. Now, OpenAI might be the most talked about name. ChatGPT might be the brand name that everybody latches onto, but there are many competitors. Google's creating its own AI model. It's called Gemini. It has a couple different versions. There's a company called Anthropic, who I would say is OpenAI's biggest competitor. They create an AI model called Claude, and in many ways it's superior to ChatGPT. Then you have Meta creating its own. Then you have several other companies out there competing. So what happened very quickly was now all these companies are having all these different AI models, and you're having to go, well, this one's really good at this, and so I have to subscribe to that. But this one has X, Y, and Z features, so I have to subscribe to that. And oh my gosh, what a nightmare, because now I have to subscribe to another one over here that's an image generator, because I want to generate images as well. And oh, now there's 15 other image generators that are all better at different things. So you find yourself with 15 different subscriptions and a bunch of different interfaces that you have to learn and a bunch of different context switching that you have to do in order to put all of this stuff together. And so what I realized very quickly is nobody's got time for that. And nobody wants to spend, hundreds of dollars a month just to have 15 different tools. So the way that most of these apps or these companies operate is they have a customer-facing subscription, but they also have what's called an API, which means any third-party app can tap into their same functionality, their same image or models and tools and functions and features, and they can bring them into another app. And so that's how Magi is able to pull all these things into once. They all have APIs, and all Magi does is we just hook them all into the same place, give them a place to sort of be accessed centrally, and allow our users to access all those functions from one place for one price. Now, we pay all the API fees and usage in the back end, and we just allow you to have one subscription and forget about it.
That's really very user-friendly. As a pastor of a campus, I'm trying to reach people, I'm trying to make disciples. In some ways, I've started kind of seeing AI and even Magi as kind of my virtual assistant.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, I don't have an assistant on my team. Back in the heyday, 20 years ago, I had 2 assistants,
Mm-hmm.
but now trying to streamline ministry post-COVID. What are some of the ways you've seen church leaders effectively use AI or Magi specifically to eliminate some of those administrative headaches in order to be with the people, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I mentioned some before, converting one piece of content into other different types of content, to sort of help feed the sheep, so to speak. You get a whole, instead of getting, one usage out of a sermon, you get many usages out of a sermon. I did hear one really interesting take on how one of the pastors at a local church was using it. And he had basically a list of volunteers, and then, you've got a list of events and all of the details about your weekly gatherings and what types of volunteers you need where. And what AI is really good at is taking a bunch of data, a bunch of information, and doing things with it, making sense of it. and organizing it. And so what he did was he was basically able to upload the CSV file of all his volunteers, what their roles are, what their areas are, upload the calendar of events and the ministry gatherings that they have and all the volunteer needs for those gatherings. And he was able to just say, schedule everyone.
Wow.
And instantly create a spreadsheet calendar that spread all the volunteers out evenly in where they can be, so that they're not volunteering too much and some people aren't getting enough. And it just easily did that for him in seconds. And what you're then able to do is, let's say Kathy has a conflict and she's scheduled on the 5th and the 17th. You can simply tell the AI, hey, Kathy has a conflict on the 17th and the 5th. Can you rearrange the schedule so that we can put her somewhere else and replace her with somebody who doesn't have a conflict? And it will. The degree at which AI can really understand what you need just by you saying what you need, just like you would to a real person, is truly the game changer that I was amazed by. Like, it was truly magical to me that I can just literally say what I want. I don't have to figure out some computer language. I don't have to find the magic words. I literally, the same way that I would tell a human being, here's the problem I have. Can you fix it? Yeah. The AI understands it and it can implement it. Really remarkable. And the more you do that, the more of those little items that you say, I wonder if AI can do this. Let me just ask it. The more you do that, the more you realize you can accomplish with AI. It's almost like, for those of us who are around like before the internet was a thing, I remember I was just coming up in high school when we got internet for the first time, and it was like the more you use the internet, the more you realize you could use the internet for. And then Google came around. It was the same thing. The more you used Google, the more you realize you can use Google for. And so it's just a matter of starting with little tests. What do you have to do today? Well, I have X, Y, and Z tests. Put that into AI and say, can you help me with any of these? And see what it comes up with.
That's great. Well, I know for me, sometimes I've copied email addresses, and then in order to use it, I needed a comma in between. So I would just say, put commas in between these email addresses, and it will do it. I wanted to ask you about the ethics of, pastors. Certainly we don't want pastors to say, all right, Claude, write my sermon for Sunday. How would you describe the ethical use of AI for a pastor? And even thinking back to you as a student pastor years ago, if you had AI back then, how would that have changed things for you? I just want to hear a little bit more about kind of helping us understand even the right ways to use it, so to speak.
Sure. So I love to answer this question by going back to my marketing agency. And, it might be a weird thing for churches to think about marketing agency in the context of doing ministry, but they're very similar. When I was a marketer and a client would hire me, oftentimes they would hire me to do copywriting for them, landing pages, website homepages, blog post articles, social media content. And at the end of the day, what our role is in many aspects is a ghostwriter. We are not writing, I'm not publishing a blog post in my name on their website. I'm publishing it in the owner's name or the CEO's name on their website and on their Twitter and on their Instagram. I was a ghostwriter. Now, that doesn't mean that the CEO, the person whose name is on it, had nothing to do with it. Their reputation is on the line. They're the one who has to publicly say, yes, this was from me. This is what I approved. And in the same way, when a lead pastor decides what the mission and vision of a church is, somebody else might write that mission and vision, but ultimately the congregation looks to the pastor and says the pastor or the elders maybe are the ones who set this vision, even though they're the ones that didn't write all the words, right? So in that same way, that's how I see AI. Ultimately, it's our ghostwriter in many ways, if you're using it to help you with writing. Now, the ideas, the inspiration, the plan that is executed ultimately comes from you. AI is not just going to magically, decide, here's what I'm going to write for you today. You have to prompt it. And then when it's all said and done, you have to look at what it read and go, is this representative of me? and what I want to present to my people. Now, of course, you should know your congregation, know their needs. You should write out at least that outline and examples from your own life. But if you're just helping AI help you come up with transition points and come up with examples or analogies. I'm historically very bad at analogies. So I love it when AI can help me with analogies, or maybe ask it, is there anything I'm missing here? AI is a really helpful assistant, a writing coach. It's a writing editor. And in many ways, the parallel that I use there is just like a ghostwriter helps you, or like an editor in chief helps you edit your content. That's what AI is for. And I think that's the most ethical way of using it. I don't believe, and again, going back to the idea of if you have it write something for you and you read it and you yourself are a good writer, you realize real quick it's not as good as you. So you will inevitably want to edit, read everything, make sure that it is, again, representative of you and what the Holy Spirit has put on you to teach your congregation. But, when I go back to looking at my, when I was a youth director, I actually wasn't writing the sermons myself. So the way that we were set up, we were a satellite campus. And so the main youth director up at that campus decided what the sermon series was going to be, what the teaching was going to be, what the lesson was going to be, where the scriptures came from. And so he would basically prepare the whole outline for me. I just had to come in and make sure it applied from my perspective to my students, with my own examples. And so I see AI very similar in that way, where it's coming alongside us to help just enhance our writing, or to edit, or, to help us find all the, the little in between pieces.
Yeah. Well, and I really appreciate that. I find, like, for me, sometimes I will ask, one of the AI models, help me make this more compelling and more succinct. And I'll just put the host script for Sunday in there, and it tightens it up. Maybe tell us about personas, because in some ways that is what I'm doing in that moment. But there's a way in Magi that you can actually have these experts are already set up and ready, and you can just access them. How does that work?
Yeah, personas is a concept that we had pretty much from day one with Magi. We launched in March of 2023, so a little over a year and a half ago. And we had this before OpenAI created what they call GPTs. And the concept here is that AI by default is trained on billions of data points. And the way that it forms its responses is it's filtering all of this knowledge and data that it's been trained on into what it thinks goes most appropriately with what you've prompted it. So it by default has its own sort of voice. It has its own way of articulating and speaking, so to speak. So that's why you get a lot of stuff that's like, man, this sounds like AI wrote it. Yeah, it does, because AI did write it, and it has no personality by default. It has the most generic and wide personality possible. So the idea of persona is you give it a set of instructions that really funnels in and focuses in its knowledge and its responses. The best example is the marketing copywriter. Again, this is what I did for 15 years. When you instead say, I'm going to go to a generalist and have them write me a bunch of marketing copy, you're not going to get as good of results as if you go, I'm going to go to a marketing copywriter expert and have them write me copy. And it sounds a bit weird if you're hearing it for the first time, but simply by giving the AI the instruction that you are an expert copywriter, you excel in writing compelling copy for X, Y, and Z company, or for X, Y, and Z audience. When you give it specific instructions like that, giving it a role, almost like you would give a job description to an employee, it really changes the AI's response in dramatic ways. And the output that you get is significantly more different. And so the idea of a persona is exactly that. You give it a role, you give it instructions to how you want it to focus its training and its data so that the output is more aligned with what you want. And so you can create, in Magi, we have 50 different preloaded personas, everything from a Bible scholar to a marketing expert to a social media expert to a social media generator, like all kinds of stand-up comedian is one of my favorite ones to use. But you can also create your own. And so one of the first tutorials I wrote was how to get AI to write like you. And it's just as easy as giving it examples of your writing style and having it describe your writing style and come up with a sort of like a rubric or a guideline to how to write like you. And then you simply create a persona that has that instruction in there. And it's remarkable how when you go to have it write something, that it sounds so much more like you wrote it than the generic AI that you would typically get.
It's fascinating. I've loved working with your tool, Magai. In fact, tell everybody the website. How do they find you?
Yeah, it's magai.co, magai.co, and you can find out everything there.
Excellent. Well, one thing to do, and this is not about your AI in particular, but for some folks that are new to AI, I always say it's a great brainstormer. A friend of mine says it's a great thought partner, but sometimes it will give you information that's not accurate, and you need to go double check.
That's an important thing to know about AI. It's not. So many people make the mistake of thinking about it, of seeing it like a computer and like Google. Like when you ask it a question about something, it's going to go search the internet and find the answer. That's not how AI works. It works much more like our own brains. We've been trained, we've read things, we've learned things. And when we're asked something, we're putting all that learning into what we think is the right answer. And AI, again, can make mistakes. The technical term for AI when it makes stuff up is called hallucinating. And it does tend to hallucinate. Some models are more likely to hallucinate than others, which is why I do love Claude. Claude is actually my favorite AI to use because it tends to hallucinate less than the GPT models. But yeah, it's really important to not treat it like an answer bot, to not treat it like factual information. You really have to use your critical thinking and fact check anything that it gives you. A lot of times, fun use case is when I'm at Bible study. We go to a Bible study every week. My wife and I do a married couples group, and then I have a men's Bible study on Mondays that I go to by myself. I'll open up Magi, I'll turn on the Bible Scholar, and I'll ask it about something that we're talking about, and I will just see what it says about the passage that we're diving into, or maybe ask for the Greek word that we're really focusing on and see what it gives me. And I'm using my critical thinking every time. I'm not just taking it at face value. I'm saying, is that true? Is that right? Or maybe did it hallucinate? Many times it's 100% accurate, but you always do have to sort of take that approach, that just like when you would talk to a human being, like sometimes a human being might have learned something 10 years ago and they think what they remember about it was factual, but it might not be. You always want to kind of take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Dustin, thank you so much. And I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, likewise. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for joining us on the Post Christian Podcast. More resources available at ericbryant.org.